I was just ranting.
It's okay. I actually have a comment and a question. I don't know if
Is your mic working?
Oh, a little close. This good? Closer. I have a comment and a question. So I don't know if you're interested in this, but the body stuff keeps making me think of it. So I just wanted to say it and see what you think. I recently read a book that said in ancient Greece, people had no concept of the body until eventually Hippocratic doctors kind of discover the body. So when they have a sensation, they thought it was like a god, right? That it wasn't their body, but they weren't enlightened because, I don't know. So does this seem plausible that people could have been living without a concept of the body? Like a whole, like our body, like what most of us think that it's this physical entity with boundaries.
Well, they certainly had, as far as I know, a concept of the body, because they were seeing bodies. They were in fact a kind of, they had worshipping the human body. When you go to Athens, to the Museum of Athens, you have all these beautiful kouroi, beautiful statues that are incomparably superior to what the Romans were doing in the statue. When you go to Roman statues, sculptures are far inferior to this beautiful. So they had this worship of the body, but when they were experiencing bodily sensations, yes, they were kind of, everything that was going on was some deity making it happen. The curse, the sun in the sky was a god, on his chariot, and that simple explanation, yes, but there are horses, pulling the chariot. How can they pull it in the sky? Oh, that's very simple. The horses are winged. So they are winged horses. So you can. It's a little bit like a little bit similar to, in modern physics, a string theory. That's very similar. That whenever you have a problem, you get out of it by creating something new that is not verifiable. So,
well, I was suspicious of the book. I just wondered maybe I was being ignorant because I couldn't conceive that it was that way.
But so definitely, they were they were intelligent. They were aware of their emotions. They were aware, but they were seeing everything as divine. And if you think about it, that's not too bad. You see, they had a God for everything. There are a multiplicity of gods. That was their problem. They had a God for the sources. They had a God for the wine, for the.
Okay. Thank you. My question was not on that, actually. I just wanted to mention this book. So I was listening to the webcast, I think it was last weekend, and you said unfortunately, I think you broke up, and so I missed what you were explaining, and you were telling somebody to kind of how you figure out what you're doing on this path, which is, I guess, what I'm trying to figure out. I don't really know how to do the investigations, and I heard you say to somebody, I think this is what you said, it's either you do investigations with experience or philosophy.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what I am or both, and I'm just trying to figure that out.
in this moment, when I speak, you are hearing my words.
Yes.
It is you, right? So it is the real you. It's not a fake you that is hearing my words, right?
Yes.
So the real you, the one which is really hearing my words, I call it consciousness. So we have to be open that, I said the real you, and in general, we make the assumption that this you is your body.
Or my mind, maybe.
Most people make this assumption. I don't know whether you do that. But we have to be open to the possibility that that is not the case. That the body is an instrument through which you perceive, but that the body is not necessarily the instrument that perceives. Am I clear? We have to be open to this possibility. So, definitely, what we can say with certainty, that if it were true that there is a distinction between me as consciousness, that which perceives, and the body, if there is a distinction to be made, I am definitely consciousness rather than the body. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Because I trapped you before because I asked you, would you agree that the one who perceives is the real you? Right? So having said that, you were cooked. So then I say, let's assume for the sake of the argument that there is a distinction, that there is a difference between that which perceives and the body, then which one is it going to be, right? So, and you say, yeah, then definitely I am consciousness rather than the body. I am not proving to you that there is a difference. I'm just saying, just in case there is a difference, you are consciousness rather than the body, right? So, the investigation is about establishing whether there is a difference or not, and how can we establish that? That's the first step. In other words, the first step is a dissociation between me and as consciousness and the body. And then we have to find out whatever reason we have to believe that consciousness and the body are identical. And we have to show that we have some doubts about it, possibly. So, one of the arguments, for instance, that the body and consciousness are identical is, well, I've never experienced consciousness without my body. But then I say, is that true? Because that would assume that you experience your body at all times. What about when you dream? You see, you may be experiencing a different body. Or what about when you read a book or watch a movie on TV, when you are really in the movie? You see, your body may appear off and on but we may have moments without the body. And what about also in the interval between two thoughts, when we jump from one thought to another thought? Where is my body in this interval, or in the interval between two perceptions? So, one thing is for certain, is that in our experience, our experience of consciousness is continuous. And that's also important to verify for yourself. And that the experience of the body is discontinuous, it's not continuous. It's important to satisfy yourself, to verify that it is your experience that consciousness is continuous. And why am I saying that? First, because you are the only one who experiences your consciousness, right? So you are the only one who can tell. Second, you have to ask yourself, how can I ascertain a moment when I am not conscious? How can I have any evidence of a moment when I am not conscious? Is that possible?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
I know this is the wrong answer, actually, but I'm going to say it anyway. Sometimes I feel like when I've been daydreaming or something, and I come back, that during the daydream, that I wasn't conscious. But I know the answer is I wouldn't know I was daydreaming if I wasn't conscious during it. But in my experience, it's kind of like...
Well, you and I, what we call to be conscious is different.
Okay, so I'm using...
Because let's say you are in Shropshire, right? It's a winter, meaning it's August. The clouds are low, it's freezing cold, and it rains intermittently. And now you believe, without daydreaming, that you are in La Jolla, on the beach, right? Or on a bar, somewhere, with view of the ocean and a martini, right? So, you are daydreaming. It's not real. Unfortunately, you are in Shropshire. But nevertheless, you are conscious of La Jolla, the ocean, and the martini. So there is consciousness of the martini, there is consciousness of the daydream.
I see.
Right? So, but how could you possibly ascertain? Because you are the only one who can speak about your consciousness. Nobody else. It's private. How can you validate experientially a moment when you are not conscious? Because in order to validate it, you need to experience your lack of consciousness. But if you experience the absence of consciousness, you have to be conscious of the absence of consciousness.
So this is like the reality argument. Why we can't think non-existence. It works for consciousness too then.
Right. You cannot, right, you see? And in fact, they are one and the same. But yeah, for the same reason, yeah, there is a as we would say in physics, consciousness and reality are dual notions. But dual in this sense means they are two sides of the same coin. In fact, they are dual in non-duality. You see, they are dual notions, like wave and particle. They are dual notions, but it's the same reality behind. So there is one reality that shows that consciousness or that shows that's reality, but it's the same. That's why we use similar argument, but that was an interesting remark, but I'm just trying to show to you that the experience of a discontinuity in consciousness is absolutely impossible. Because it would require consciousness to experience this discontinuity. So, the argument according to which the body is always with you is not really satisfactory. But you are always with you, right? So the only thing which is always with you is consciousness, really. So consciousness is a priori, the best candidate for being you. And the investigation now is, in the light of your experience of consciousness, because you know yourself, you know that you are conscious, therefore you have access to the experience of consciousness, to show to yourself, to convince yourself that there is not a shred of evidence that consciousness is dependent upon the body. That I cannot do the work for you. But a lot of the work is done by following your own question, and then you can come here and say, Francis, and then you come up with your argument, and we try to see whether it's valid or not. You see, so that's how we operate. So as a result of this part of the investigation, it becomes clear, at least, that it is very much possible that consciousness is not dependent upon the body. It should become clear that it is impossible, based upon our phenomenal experience, the experience of objects, the experience of the body, the experience, the experiments that can be conducted in neuroscience labs, etc., that no matter where we go, it is impossible to make the determination as to whether consciousness is dependent upon the body or not. So then, we are open to the possibility that consciousness is independent from the body. Now, the moment we are open to the possibility that consciousness is independent from the body, a new avenue opens, a new perspective presents itself. The body is limited, right? As long as we believe consciousness to be one with the body, dependent upon the body, consciousness is limited. But if consciousness is not dependent on the body, a new possibility presents itself, which is that consciousness is unlimited. That consciousness is unlimited, all dimensions, is absolutely unlimited. And now, since this possibility presents itself, now the question is, how can I verify it or falsify it? And the easiest part, the one that is the best for most people, is the experimental path. And the experimental path, once I am open to the possibility that consciousness is universal, infinite, that it is the reality, the ultimate reality of everything, to conduct experiment by changing my ways of thinking, of perceiving, of interacting with people, of interacting with events in my life. To think, behave, decide as if consciousness were universal. You see, because that's something most people don't do. For most people, consciousness is limited. So they always act, think, believe from the same perspective. So they kind of box themselves into the box of their implicit assumption about consciousness. And the beauty is that if consciousness is universal, and if it is a reality that creates everything, every event, it will matter where we come from when we think, when we perceive, when we interact, when we act, when we decide. It will matter, you see, because then we will be deciding from the right perspective. And then by deciding, acting, thinking from this new perspective, there will be outcomes, both outcomes within. We should experience an increased harmony, a feel right feeling, also a feeling it feels right both, because right is a good adjective because it applies both to, it feels right in terms of intelligence, understanding, but it feels right in terms of love, of it is good, and it feels right also in terms of aesthetics, of beauty. So internally it will feel right, but also in the world around us it will feel, you will experience serendipity. So that's how we get convinced. That's how we find out. That's the part of the investigation. That's the most important part is the second part, the experiential part. But nobody will really place his money on the horse of non-duality unless they have already kind of some inkling that it may be that this horse may be a winner, you know, because if you are certain that the horse is going to lose, you are not going to put your money on it. So in the beginning you put a little bit of money and then if the horse keeps winning, you can increase.
Yes, thank you. I didn't realize that was the investigation. I listened to you once, and I did act as if, but I wasn't convinced that consciousness was universal at that point.
You don't need to be convinced, you understand? You need to be open to the possibility so that you can try to find out.
But I did pretend, like I heard you say act as if to someone, but I didn't realize that was the investigation. And I was just standing outside doing that, and someone who's usually not very nice to me came up to me, and we had this like intimate moment. I was like, oh.
You see, yeah.
I didn't realize I was supposed that the path is to remind yourself.
Yeah, you know. So that when I was talking about serendipity, you see, these things happen.
Thank you.